Well, last one of today. I hope everyone is still a bit fresh, as very nicely introduced. I'm an associate at Delva. We're an office in landscaping and in urbanism. And I'm going to talk today about the value of green, and specifically after a brief introduction, showing two cases, two projects of us, where when we first got them in the office, we were like, no, is this a nice assignment? It was a bit dull. It was a very traditional brief. And then we thought, well, we also do have the power to change the brief, to change the starting point, and then see what it gets to. And actually that led to we think at least, and I hope I can convince you of it, but two very inspirational designs. But I first want to start with a quick introduction. I don't do this alone, of course. We have a very nice team of people, architects, landscape architects, engineers, and urbanists, who we work with in the center of Amsterdam. And this maybe doesn't look like the center of Amsterdam, but it is. Because this is our studio. It's a place where we work, where you can also stay, and where the founder of the office also lives on top. And it's we're like a practice what you preach team. And therefore, working in this green environment, it also helps to stimulate, of course, the happiness of our employees and colleagues. And of course, it also stimulates the local biodiversity in the city. Well, and that's also our mission. So we do believe in the power of nature to tackle the assignments that we're facing today within this century, within everything that's going on. And I'm using the exact same words as how this Congress started. So then I think the circle is round, which is really nice. But we try to turn that design process upside down. So we really try to start every time from the green, from the landscape as a base, also looking towards the essence of those places, and then take a position, and then through intensive collaboration, try to get the best result out of it to really create the spaces and the public realm that we all dream of. And we do this in a variety of scales. We do this mostly in the Netherlands of Belgium. We're exploring also a bit further towards London and Germany. But for instance, in the Keuvel, which was one of the first projects that we did, it went a bit viral after it was executed, because the vegetation planted there also purifies the soil underneath. Since it was a former shipyard, it was very polluted. And we're now in year 8 of that project, where Wageningen University and the University of Ghent is doing research on how much the soil pollution has been reduced since the start. Also in The Hague, for instance, the bottom left one, we made a very small pocket park, but really by multi-layered planting, really this cooling spot in one of the most paved spaces of the city. And in Borgartplein, on top, in Rijswijk, we try to really create a new city center, a social city center for play, for active, for sports, for improving the physical health of the inhabitants within a park setting. And as mentioned, because we try to tackle these assignments like this, we became Architect of the Year, which was a bit surprising because we're landscape architects by nature. But it was a very nice celebration, but far more important, we think, it was also a sign that we as a country, as a society, we're ready to really take green as the most important part, and then do all the rest, or take the green as a problem solver for all the other challenges that we're facing. And we do this almost always in collaboration, so we can't do this on our own. We have consultants, we have architects working with us, we have, of course, also private developers who we work for, public authorities. And you need them all to get convinced of a certain idea, of a certain vision, to then be executed further, because it takes a lot of people, a lot of policies, a lot of different steps to bring a project from a very nice idea into realization. And with the first two that you see on the left, those two I'm going to discuss today. In Lisse, in the left one, it's a project in Lisse, residential development. We're really in the lead, so we also coordinate the full process. And in the second one, in Middelkerke, along the Belgian coast, we worked very strongly together with the architects and the engineers to not just create a building, but more to create like a landscape or a dune formation where the building is incorporated in. And I think every speaker almost talked already about the value of green. We know it's super important, but the difficulty about it is that those values are quite soft, so they are difficult to measure. After today, we saw some nice examples where it has been measured, which is really good. but we really need to start making and executing the examples that can also prove that it really works, that people can experience what effect green, water, and natural environment have on your life, on the quality of life, and also what effect it has, of course, on the biodiversity itself. So the first one I want to present is a question that came to us, I think, almost 2 years ago, as a question like, hey, we have this open landscape just southwest of Lisse, which is in the middle of the Bollenstreek, of the tulip area in the Netherlands, and we want to build for 450 houses in it. And we were like, just building 450 houses in a location which is not that well connected with public transportation and everything. If you see how the urban or public realm or urban fabric looks on the right side, it's also not the type of neighborhoods that we should create anymore in the 21st century. So then we started looking at where it came from, where the space came from, what the identity of the space used to be. And it turned out that it was actually a part of the Haarlemmermeer, which is now a big polder, but used to be a lake. It's the area where Schiphol, the big airport, is situated on. And it had a bit of an extension towards our area. So it always used to be a wet area, a lake, a swamp later, and then later on a polder. And that inspired us to take this plan that was made already before, which we got, and then we thought, like, this is not the way to go. You have a lot of streets. You have no interaction or very little interaction with green and nature. It also didn't consider the left part of the site, which we weren't allowed to build it, but just stayed like an open, grassy polder with very little value for biodiversity and nature. And then we thought, let's transform it, and let's also start from the soil, from the existing, from the history, and bring back that water landscape so that you get a very varied landscape and open space with wetlands, with more forested areas that also interact very strongly with the urban fabric that we designed. And by using some strategies, like for instance, not making huge gardens, individual gardens, but making smaller gardens or outdoor terrace spaces, but then freeing up that space for more or like a larger collective landscape, and stacking functions. So for instance, more apartments and less ground-mounted houses, but also sometimes parking underneath the built houses. And maybe there are private developers in the audience, and they will think, shit, that's really expensive to do. It also is. So it was a huge challenge, but we also had ways of reducing the costs. For instance, by really minimizing the infrastructure. In the plan now, we have only 40% of road infrastructure. We don't have underground rainwater sewage because the water just flows off over the public realm towards the water landscape. And by really making a very compact and intimate urban fabric, they also need to do less preloading and all that kind of stuff. So that led to a plan where there was way more space for nature, for water, for recreation, and of course also for the quality of life. And we have two different areas within the plan, because the right side one, that was always part of the ancient lake, of the historical lake. The left one was never part of it, and that's also why it's way higher, and why it's also not part of the same polder structure. And therefore it also asked for a different approach. So in the biggest zone, in the wetland living as we called it, you have these compact clusters where we made neighborhoods of between 40 and 60 houses, because that's a good mass or a good number where everyone knows the neighbor also. So it's also trying to enforce the social value. And then you see the blue-green fingers that surround actually this island almost completely. And that's an image of how we hope, of course, it's gonna look in a few years. I think construction will start in an extra 2 years, so we're really now in the technical design phase to bring that further. On the northern part, we have a bit more of a traditional layout and setup. We also had to please the developers somehow, but still by extending the existing canal and waterway and softening the edges and everything, and also foreseeing the park zone on the south along the water. There has been a huge investment and an extra increase in nature. And this is the plan, how it looks in total. So you see how these 450 homes, we have the same amount of housing here than there was in the traditional plan, but we have almost 12 hectares of extra water landscape as an added value. And then, of course, you need to start working with engineers, with policymakers to also get this done. And also, it was not only about creating nature and creating like a nice living environment, but also being very sustainable with how we deal with soil. For instance, that you don't have to excavate everything and then bring everything away and import new soil again. So that was calculated through. We also talked with water authorities, because the water management in the Netherlands is very unnatural, actually. It's often you have in the summer like a higher water level than you have in winter. So we talked to them and we asked, like, can we turn this around? What should we do to do that? So we have an agreement that for this part we turn it around, which of course helps the nature flourish. And then with our ecologists, we looked at what species should we bring where can we make habitats for animals to live, and how can we combine and connect all these different landscape qualities, the wetlands, the more forested areas, the grassy meadows, together, that they form one ecosystem. And so maybe as a summary, the fact that we had way less, or we need to do way less sand depletion because of our clusters are way more compact, that we have less infrastructure, so less roads and not that underground water drainage and everything, and that we get a slightly higher revenue from some of the houses because they are located, or they have such an amazing view over that landscape. We saved around 2 million euros. So that money was invested in those more expensive strategies, like making smaller gardens, putting the parking underneath. But that, in general, that led to this freeing up this space for 12 hectares of wetland landscape. And that's, of course, the big win of this whole project. And then in Middelkerke, it's along the Belgian coast. I'm originally also from Belgium, and I've spent a lot of summers along the coast. But it's not a coast site that you can be very proud of as a Belgian, because somehow we managed during the 20th century to get rid of our whole dune landscape and all the dune formations and just pave them over, make a concrete dike, and build a huge line of apartments against it. Joke is that if sea level rises, that Belgium will be protected by all the apartments standing on the dike. So, and then there's one building, one very specific building, the casino on the beach, which is a casino, and it has a small square in front, and it's really on the beach, so it's in front of that dike. And so there also we got the assignment, or we got the question, hey, we're thinking of making a team with architects, and we also need a landscape architect to design the square. And we were like, the program of casino is maybe also not the most social inclusive program. The square in front, it's a nice assignment in general, but can't we do something more with it? And then again, we looked to the essence of the place and how actually Middelkerke, this village, if you translate it, it's Middle Church. You see it here on the map. How this originated. Shouldn't have done that. And as you see through time, it was actually one of like the Wadden Islands in the north of the Netherlands. It was this very tidal area with this sand island that sometimes flow over and sometimes not. And then suddenly, or like during evolution, of course, a dune formation formed itself, and that made possible that a settlement, like a fisher's village, emerged there, so behind the dune formation, because it was protected from the sea. And that allowed Middelkerke to thrive and to become the village that it is today. And then we thought, well, can't we, this casino is so much of a barrier between the sea and the land and the whole village. Can't we bring that back, and can't we use, because there was also a question to reinforce the dike because sea levels are rising, but can't we use this building that we need to make as a mean to create more landscape, to bring that dune landscape back, but also to reinforce the dike at once. So we learned from what was there, from the dune formation, and we proposed the building as a dune formation itself. Since the casino, it doesn't need that much daylight because you want to keep the people in and keep them playing. So we put them underground in the dike itself, and then draped the dune landscape over. And then there's a small circular volume on top, which is a hotel, and they did need daylight. But this is the ambition there. So where you see that the building is half sunken in, and where you have actually a very slight or generous wave of dunes going over and bringing you to the beach and to the seaside. And from the tender proposal, which you see on the left, until the permit, which has been agreed upon right now, you see that this first ambition that we had, it was strengthened and strengthened and strengthened further. So every design decision that we made was actually to strengthen that initial idea of that dune landscape coming over, and to make it as strong and robust as possible. This is in 3D how it looks. So when you enter from the square, you actually flow over, and also the square is already waving a bit, has these different levels and topography, and then you can walk over the roofscape of the building your way, and then you can continue your way towards the beach. And then you get a lot of challenges, because you're doing something which people are not very known, which is not traditional, not standard. You are incorporating a building within a dike structure and then pulling a landscape underneath. So we had tons of talks with municipalities and authorities and engineers and coastal defense government institutions. But in the end, the permit was agreed upon, and then construction has started now. So they're working right now. The temporary sea defense is there. The dune landscape that will come over it will become the final sea defense. And also there, I think what was really nice when we submitted the tender, and we also saw the other proposals, we actually received the highest points because of the spatial quality that we offered, because we didn't offer like only 5,000 square meters of public space, but we offered almost 25,000 square meters of public space. So it was a huge gift back to the municipality and to all the visitors who visit the Belgian coast in summer. And we had the lowest construction cost, because we didn't need to make any facades, or way less facades as a traditional building on top of a square. We had to construct way less vertical elements, also build way less high. So that was a huge, actually like a win-win situation, where we combined these two elements together by using that landscape narrative and that landscape as a base, as a solution to this problem. So in the end, we made we're going to make more than 1 hectares of green space, and more than there is now almost 2 hectares more of public realm for everyone to enjoy it, to have those fantastic views over the sea, and to also reinstate a bit that historical landscape what Middelkerke was known for. That's it.